What's up, everybody? Welcome into Group Chat Football Live. I'm Peter Reese alongside D Money, and this is our daily college football show tracking recruiting, transfer movement, coaching hires, and everything else in between across the world of college football. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Appreciate everyone who's been helping us grow this page in the month and a half plus, almost 2 months that we've been going daily here. So we're going to keep it going into spring practice. Excited to cover all the happenings and the movement on the depth chart, guys making plays, the newcomers, and all the great stuff that happens in spring football. But we have some news to get to today, as there's still some of this transfer movement, still some coaching hires going on. And we'll start, with a former Super Bowl MVP, Deion Branch, being named the receivers coach, or it looks like he's going to be named officially the receivers coach here shortly at Louisville. And Jeff Brom didn't have to look far to make this hire. A guy in Branch who's been on staff at Louisville, worked in a multitude of roles there. We understand his playing career, having been the Super Bowl MVP. And Louisville needed a new receivers coach because Garrick McGee moved on. McGee is at North Carolina now with Bill Belichick. So Branch is going to step in here and coach these receivers up. Historically, Louisville always has talented receivers, and they have some guys returning here, but also losing some players. So should be, an interesting year one for Coach Deion Branch here.
Yeah, Garrick McGee, who's replacing a veteran guy who's been around the college game forever, going to a rival ACC school. But it seems like this was just a matter of time for Deion Branch to take the next step up at his alma mater. Obviously, he was ready in the building. So it just makes a lot of sense. He was a guy that never had overwhelming physical traits, good, talented receiver, but really, to me, an overachiever, which is what you want as a coach, because he can share the wisdom, how he was able to do that. Excelled at New England. New England is known for having some of the smartest receivers in the NFL. That's always been the thing with New England receivers. When they had Bill Belichick and Tom Brady, is that, their receivers, it wasn't about most athletic. It was about guys who knew what to do, who could adjust, who could read defenses. And he certainly fit that bill. Kind of ironic that Bill Belichick takes Louisville's receiving coach, and then Louisville promotes one of Bill Belichick's top receivers in Deion Branch. But he inherits a room. He loses a lot, right? Ja'Cory Brooks going out the door, but inherits a room that has some talent. Colin Lacey was going to be a really standout player on paper coming in from South Alabama. He gets injured before the season, plays 4 games, decides to redshirt. Controversial at the time, ended up working out, at least for this next season, because he is explosive. We saw that firsthand when he played the Miami Hurricanes and took 100 yards to the house. Just an explosive player, needs to be molded a little bit, but Branch should help in that regard. You bring back Chris Bell, big, 6'2", 220-pound receiver out of Missouri in high school, 1,200 career receiving yards, big physical presence. You add Bobby Golden from the transfer portal, Akron, Miami Palmetto, Pete, a school I know you're very familiar with. This guy's a dynamic player. Maybe not your every down type guy, but somebody that can be a gadget receiver for you, can return kicks, can get open quickly. Also at TJ Williams, who Brom has a relationship going back to Purdue. So interesting wide receiver room. I think Branch is a good guy to help take that group to the next level. You get Miller Moss. He's somebody who's going to deliver the mail, right? He's a accurate, intelligent quarterback. We don't have to worry about the play calling. We know what that brings to the table. So if these receivers take care of business, I think you're going to be looking at another good year of Louisville offense.
Yeah, I'm excited for Miller Moss big time. I think we understand what Jeff Brom is in terms of the quarterback position. Tyler Shuck, you see what he just did right this last week at the Senior Bowl. He was the quarterback of the week there. So it looks like he's a guy whose trajectory is only on the way up. If not for those injuries along the way in his college career, who knows where he'd be right now. But it seems like everything really worked out great for him in terms of coming together with Coach Brom at Louisville.
Yeah, he's one of my favorites, Tyler Shuck, in this draft. Really, to me, an underrated guy, big, athletic, developed very well. But I do think those offense should not miss a beat. You bring back Isaac Brown in the backfield with his speed. So if Deion Branch can get these receivers up to snuff, and look, a guy like Chris Bell, is a veteran. Colin Lacey, even though he missed time last year, was in the system, is a veteran as well, brings that explosive element. And Bobby Golden should be kind of plug and play. Another South Florida guy. We know Louisville loves to have South Florida players, South Florida receivers, going back to, look, don't have to go far. Ja'Cory Brooks last year, Tutu Atwell. The list goes on and on.
Eli Rogers,
that's a blast from the past. They love South Florida receivers. They love South Florida players in general. Lamar Jackson, Teddy Bridgewater, Isaac Brown now at running back, Ashton Gelati. We can go on and on. But this is a very, very nice fit, and you hope he does well.
So wanted to take a look here at a story that just broke here within the hour. Big recruiting news for this 2025 class, and that is an SEC flip as the Florida Gators have flipped 4-star cornerback Onis Konanbanny from Tennessee, number 35 cornerback in the country, according to the 247 composite rankings. Really interesting background on this guy. Born in France, grew up in London, moved over to the States when he was 16 to chase this dream of his, which was American football. Played soccer at a pretty high level over there in England, and then came here, was an all-state player as well on the soccer field. But a good flip here for Billy Napier late, and a guy who seems like a riser at the cornerback spot.
Soccer, isn't it a pitch, Peter? I mean, aren't you you're the soccer guy? What's going on?
Yeah, listen, I don't want to confuse people here. So we get the college football crowd. It's very distinct. I don't want to insult our audience, but I don't know how fluent they are in the soccer or football terms, I should say.
Well, as someone on the college football side, I'm in that same boat. 6'1", 180, low 4-star player, number 35 corner in the country, Columbia, South Carolina. Didn't go to South Carolina, right next door, Heathwood Hall Episcopal School. So his competition, private school, not the greatest, but the athlete is outstanding. You mentioned the soccer background. Look at his track numbers, 22 and 3.5 inches in the long jump. I think the explosiveness that you see in that long jump, you see it on tape, the short area. He's listed at 6'1", 180. I think he might be bigger than that. My only question here is, where does he play? Does he end up being a corner? Does he end up being a safety? You see physicality. He lines up outside. He makes plays in the box. You see him lined up at wide receiver. You see him returning kicks. He's taking jet sweeps. He is doing all kinds of things, and he's doing it with physicality and with explosive burst. Probably more of an explosive guy than a long speed guy, but he's got plenty of speed. And again, the size is there. I think there are some moving parts, right? He's not like the most efficient mover right now. I think that's going to come with coaching, but all the traits are there. And I think back to a year ago, Battle Miami, he was one of those guys that generated a ton of buzz at that 7-on-7 tournament down here with some of the best players in the country. That's really when his name came on the map. Committed to Tennessee. Florida kept working. He visited for that Ole Miss game, which was a huge, huge game for the Gators in so many ways. And from what he says, and this happens a lot, it was the recruits on the visit that convinced him to go to Florida, right? And the players when he visits. A lot of times, you can have everything set up for the visit perfect, but if the recruits that are with you or the players that are there on campus are saying, this isn't the place to be, that could be a problem. And you look at his quote here, what he learned from the players, according to him, they will go to war for a guy like Napier because he doesn't care about the outside. He just cares about them. This is what he told the Swamp 247, the Gators 247 site after visiting for that Ole Miss game. He will go to war for them. That's why they play hard for him. He's just a great guy, a great human being, and he wants everything for them. He's not worried about the outside noise. He's just going to keep fighting for them, right or wrong. Even if they're losing, he's going to keep fighting for them. Of course, this was right in the middle of that turnaround. So it ended up being much more positive season for the Gators, and that was really a key step in that turnaround against Ole Miss. So when you win a big game like that, there's a lot of positive effects, not just that particular season, but in the future. And here, flipping a 4-star corner / safety from a rival. I like the pickup. I like the upside. You got Hilton Stubbs. You got Ben Hanks. You got a lot of talented defensive backs in this class. Now you're adding more.
Yeah, and you mentioned the size that he's listed at 180, but I agree with you. It looks bigger than that. You see in this picture here, and this was from when he was playing that was last spring, right? the tournament that he played in that you were just referencing. I mean,
January, so about a year ago.
Yeah, so a year ago. I mean, but you look at him there in the picture underneath you in the graphic, and he does not look small whatsoever there, and that's a year ago. So the frame is there, and he's got the burst, man. I'm excited to see him develop.
It seems like a willing tackle. That's why I think, look, if corner doesn't work out, and corner is just such a unique position, the movements and the technique, we'll see how he takes to that. He could take to it like a duck to water. But if it, for whatever reason, is too much of an adjustment from where he's playing to playing corner in the SEC, I think safety should be no problem with his physicality and speed.
So moving on from the Florida Gators, but only slightly, because we're going to talk about a former Gator here and a player who is, one of the poster children, I should say, of this era of transfers and COVID years, as he's one of the few last ones who's getting a COVID year here, and that's David Reese. So guy who played at Cal the last couple seasons, started his career at Florida, and is now going to end his career. We presume he's ending his career here, unless there's another year of eligibility floating out there somewhere. But David Reese headed to Syracuse, a guy who's actually pretty productive the last couple years at Cal, has battled some injuries in his career. Coming out, I think was looked at more, because this is someone that you and I remember as a recruit, I think was looked at as more of an inside linebacker, turned out to eventually become more of a pass rusher, more of an edge here at this stage of his career. But a good veteran pickup, you have to say, if you're Fran Brown in Syracuse.
It'd be a guy you interviewed, how many years ago? That must have been 2017,
yeah.
Right? So 8 years ago?
Shoot.
9 years ago you interviewed this guy?
Yeah.
So pretty amazing. 8th year of college, just for some, and look, the COVID year, the 2 red shirts, that's how we landed here. But if you look just for perspective, some of the guys in his class, Trevor Lawrence, Micah Parsons, Pat Surtain, the second, he's almost old enough for Pat Surtain the first, and Jalen Waddle. So some guys that have been playing professional football for a long time were in that class. 6'2", 240, out of Vero Beach, Florida. That's on Florida's Treasure Coast, north of South Florida, on the east side of the state. Didn't play much at Florida, 5 seasons, only 15 tackles. But then he goes to Cal and really starts to pick it up. In the last 2 seasons, playing mostly on that edge, 55 tackles, 11 sacks, and 5 forced fumbles. There you see that 4-star explosiveness. This was a highly recruited player when he did sign with Florida originally. So he has that explosiveness in his body. He's physically mature. He's found his position, and really he's thrived. And if you're Syracuse, again, you lose Fadil Diggs to the pros. This is someone who you got from Texas A&M, maybe a little bigger than David Reese, but a similar type of profile as that slimmer, leaner edge. He'll come in, help fill that void. I'm sure that you do not want to take a step back if you're Fran Brown. You want to keep that momentum going. You need win-now players. You need experience. And I don't think there's anybody in college football that has more experience than David Reese as an 8th-year player on a defense that, most of these guys weren't even in high school, right? When he came out, not even. So it's amazing how the college game has changed. Usually these are like Mormon guys that are this age, and they don't have the experience in college. So interesting times. We'll see if this happens more often now that you have the JUCO ruling with Diego Pavia making it a question whether JUCO years count for eligibility. Do you see guys take 2 years of JUCO, redshirt, and then play 7 years, 8 years? The COVID year is obviously going to change things for some of these guys, but there's still other ways to stretch out that eligibility. So we'll see if this is norm. But I think for Syracuse, you want to compete in that conference this next year. You do not want to take a step back. Ricky Collins at quarterback. We'll see how he replaces Kyle McCord, who was the most prolific passer in the country. You bring back Trevor Pena. You lost a lot at wide receiver. You lose LaQuint Allen, but you do have pieces there, and you hope to keep it going.
Yeah, and here's the full transfer list for Syracuse. It hasn't necessarily been like a banner class, loaded with highly ranked transfers. Jean-Ray Reed from left there going to SC, so that was a huge loss for them. But then you look at the guys that they've added. Ricky Collins, you mentioned, Nikhil Bertrand at offensive tackle coming over from Alabama. Chris Thomas, 6'6", 327, defensive lineman from Marshall. David Reese here. Tyshawn Russell at wide receiver. Fran Brown Jr. there. So, again, it hasn't been a crazy transfer class if you're Syracuse. So you'd have to say this is one of their better pickups.
Yeah, and look, here's what I'll say. Last year, we were not talking about Syracuse like we're talking about it now, right? So, Fadil Diggs was a pretty highly acclaimed transfer because he was such a good high school recruit. Kyle McCord, same thing, but Jackson Meeks had barely played, right, when he transferred from Georgia. He was not an impact player at Georgia, goes to Syracuse, and then you see him at the Senior Bowl. So, we'll see how these things turn out, but you got to trust the coaching. You got to trust what they're going to do to develop these guys. Again, I'm looking at Jackson Meeks just to give an example. 44 yards, 65 yards, 23 yards, first year Syracuse, over 1,000 yards. So trust the coaching staff. If you're a Syracuse Orange fan, they've earned that with just the incredible turnaround that they had. They just need, they need players, they need bodies that fit what they want to do. And I think Reese fits right into that Diggs role. Maybe not as highly acclaimed, but he was a blue chip player coming out, and that age matters, man. That's why these BYUs of the world always overperformed. There's something about being an older, more physical player. And I think Reese, someone who's had 11 sacks the past 2 years, it wouldn't shock me if he breaks through and has double-digit sacks this year in the ACC. It's certainly possible. He's familiar with the conference, even though he's coming from Cal. So that's one to watch. I think it's a good pickup, and we'll help them right away.
And listen, he's goes up against a freshman. He's going to have to show some of that grown man strength on him. Has about 7-8 years on some of these guys. But no, man, I think it's some people would say it's not a good thing. But if you're David Reese, you got an opportunity here now to make some money NIL-wise, be a part of, a team that's definitely ascending here in the ACC. And you leave Cal, so you're familiar here with the ACC, but should be an interesting potential season for him at Syracuse here.
And that turf's going to help him get off too.
Yeah.
Syracuse, the reason why they've had so many pass rushers over the years, including Diggs last year, you can get off that turf pretty quick for an explosive player like Reese.
It's like a small ballpark in baseball. I know you like the baseball
there you go.
terminology. So, guys, remember to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. This is Group Chat Football Live. This is our page, Group Chat Sports. So we go live daily here, talking college football, transfer news, recruiting news, coaching stuff, and we are going to get to the speculation game here when it comes to some coaching moves and look at the Ohio State offensive coordinator potential hot board here, as of course Chip Kelly is headed to the Raiders as their offensive coordinator. And there's some really interesting names potentially in the mix here for this job. This is a situation where if you're Ohio State, you win the national championship, and this is the sort of thing that makes it so tough to stay at the top, making the right hire like this. You're replacing your quarterback. We all understand that in Will Howard, but the OC hire is going to really set the tone for what happens at quarterback, and then understanding you're stepping into a situation with the best player in the country. So this is going to be a highly coveted position.
Yeah, one of the most interesting situations in college football as far as who's going to take this job, what impact is it going to have on what's an open quarterback competition. These are defending national champions. So a lot of intrigue around the spot. Ryan Day, really good offensive mind. He's going to be involved. How much maybe depends on the name. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And there's a lot of layers to this. So starting with Brian Hartline, who is the logical choice as the offensive coordinator. If you're just looking at the fact that he was co-offensive coordinator with Chip Kelly, this is a grad of Ohio State, played in the NFL, and has become one of the premier wide receiver coaches in the country. You look at Jeremiah Smith, who he recruited, probably does not go to Ohio State without Brian Hartline. Emeka Egbuka, Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, go on and on. The recruiting that this guy's done is outstanding, particularly in South Florida. He is one of those names that you do not want to hear if you're trying to recruit a wide receiver. You don't want to hear that Brian Hartline's involved. The negative is pretty obvious. You're the defending national champs. You're bringing in a young quarterback. You have high expectations of repeating as national champs or certainly being in that picture. You don't want to take a step back, and you might be combining an inexperienced quarterback with an inexperienced play caller because Hartline has not called plays at Ohio State. So that is, to me, the negative. However, if you do not give Hartline the opportunity now, which he's been waiting for and kind of working towards, do you lose him as a wide receivers coach, right? How's that impact recruiting? How's that impact guys on your roster? So that's the other part of this, because I could, Hartline's had opportunities to be offensive coordinator before, gotten passed up recently as last year to be the play caller. But I think this time it's going to be a little different. He's been there long enough that if you bring someone in, especially a younger guy, I'm not sure how he's going to take that. So is it worth losing, your wide receiver coach, who's also critical to your recruiting operation, your retention operation? That's what Ohio State's going to have to balance. And look, it's possible this guy gets the job, calls plays, and ends up being one of the best young offensive coordinators in the country. And then you lose him to a head coaching job down the road and feel good about it because you got him on the up. Hard to predict these kind of things. That's the uncertainty of having a new play caller.
As Juan Manuel Ventura says, he says, I thought Hartline was the offensive coordinator, but he was the co-OC, not necessarily the guy calling the plays.
Yeah, and you saw with Chip Kelly getting $6 million in the pros. He was really the one driving that offense. And look, Ryan Day's another guy who is an offensive guy. So do you go to a situation where Hartline and Ryan Day are working hand in hand, and Ryan Day sort of easing him into the process because of his experience? That's another way we could look at it.
Hartline, I believe he was interviewing for the West Virginia job before Rich Rodriguez got it as well. So this is a guy who, has had interest, like you said, at other stops, at other places, whether it be head coaching job. I don't know if he's been offered any of those jobs, but someone who it would, to me, be a little weird if they don't offer him the play calling duties.
Yeah.
What else does he need to prove? I guess what he would need to prove is go somewhere else, call plays, and show that he can do it there for them to want to bring him back. That's the only thing I can think of, right? But it would, to me, be a little bit of a red flag if at this point they don't think he can do it.
And look, the elephant in the room, the best player in the country is Jeremiah Smith. He was the best player in high school. He was the best player by the end of this season. He's the best player in the country. Very close relationship with Brian Hartline. We've seen all the stories about tampering and these offers that are record-breaking offers, right, to a Jeremiah Smith. Does he become more receptive to that kind of recruitment and being just like the college football LeBron if his coach leaves? That's speculation, but these are the thoughts that run through your head if you're an Ohio State fan. Ultimately, you're still celebrating that championship. Very good chance, no matter who's the offensive coordinator, whether it's Pete or me, that's going to be a very good offense next year and a national championship contender. But something to consider.
You said thoughts that run through Ohio State fans' heads. It sounds like a nightmare for Ohio State fans. It sounds like a dream scenario for other schools.
Oh yeah, and look, they're thinking about it. That this is something people are watching.
Again, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Appreciate everyone who's on with us here. This is Group Chat Football Live. Juan Manuel asking if it would be a mistake. Look, I don't think it'd be a mistake. I think you got to trust him at this point. He's done so much to get you guys to this point, to have these people in place. And you kind of alluded to it, D. Like, Ryan Day has called plays at a high level. So, does he kind of just lean on Hartline and then take the reins when need be? Maybe that's what it's going to be, something like that. But those are always tricky situations too, because then does Hartline feel like he has Day, kind of creeping over the top of him, and does that change his philosophy? And there's just a lot of weird things when you talk about sharing play calling duties.
Yep. So the other option is going with, Ohio State was the number 2 offense, I would say, overall. If you really look at all the metrics, the number 2 overall offense in the country was Ohio State. Number 1 offense this year, Miami Hurricanes, Cam Ward, Damian Martinez, Xavier Restrepo, Elijah Arroyo, that offensive line. We know the players, but the man calling the plays was Shannon Dawson. He was at Houston before going to Miami. Houston had an excellent offense his last year there with Clayton Thune, with Tank Dell. So there's a guy who's had 2 back-to-back excellent offenses. Took a year to really get it going at Miami, but 2 top 10 type offenses in pretty close succession. Diverse background. Hal Mumme, the original air raid. That's the tree he came from. Dana Holgerson, when he sort of adjusted the air raid, Dawson was with him. Then he goes to Miami, has a lot of autonomy in the passing game, but Miami, Mario Cristobal, Alex Mirabal, big influence in the running game, which was one of the better running games in the country. You saw a lot of tight ends, a lot of play action, things you don't usually see in an air raid attack. So this is someone who's been around a lot of different schemes, had a lot of success, and is coming off the best offense in the country. Of course, Cam Ward had a lot to do with it. The talent had a lot to do with it, but he did a really good job. So this is a name that On3 reports as a potential fit. A source talking to On3 says you're not going to find a more diverse background. We just talked about that. Coach with Hal Mumme and Dana Holgerson, studying the aerial and ground attack. Also a relentless recruiter who stayed on Cam Ward after declaring for the NFL draft. So that would be an interesting fit. And look, I mean, if he had the number 1 offense with good talent, with great talent, he's going to have great talent in Ohio State. You could expect him to, I think, have a top 10 offense with the right quarterback there.
Yeah, I would expect that as well. And look, even in the year that it wasn't prolific, his first season at Miami with Tyler Van Dyke at quarterback, the metrics actually showed Miami was still pretty highly rated, top 25, top 30 in a lot of important metrics offensively. They had a lot of turnovers, a lot of issues that came up throughout the season there. But, I think for what he was working with at that point, and you look back on it, it wasn't too bad of a job.
No, I think he did a great job, quite frankly, turning around an offense that was, this is one of the worst offenses in the country when Dawson got to Miami. And 2 years in, it's number 1. So you don't have to do that rebuild at Ohio State, but I think he is the caliber of guy that is worth talking about for this kind of position that any offensive coordinator in the country would consider.
So next guy who is on, a lot of people's radar for this spot, and if you're Ohio State, you'd think that you're going to probably go big game hunting here if you don't go with the guy on staff in Heartline. Shannon Dawson, having coached the number 1 offense in the country, that would qualify as big game hunting. But I think this next one, out of all the names on the list, is a pretty ambitious one, and that's Will Stein, who is the offensive coordinator at Oregon, and he was a big part of Bo Nix's success in that run for the Heisman there that he made, and obviously we see the success that he's had early in his career. But someone who doubled it up this year with Dylan Gabriel and has now shown in back-to-back years the ability to do it with different quarterbacks, and he's at Oregon, so you understand he's well paid right now. This would not be a cheap move for Ohio State to make, but someone who's quickly rising in the ranks here. Played at Louisville from 2008 to 2012 as a quarterback. So I think this one makes sense in terms of, shooting for the stars, but he's got a pretty good situation at Oregon right now.
Yeah, you also had Chris Hampton linked to Ohio State's defensive coordinator job. So it's one of these, if you can't beat him, join him, I guess, with Ohio State putting it on Oregon there in the playoff. It would be an interesting fit. I think Will Stein, you're looking at him as potentially being a head coach, interviewed for that San Diego State job. That to me seems like a more logical next step for him. He's a little different than, sometimes when you're an offensive coordinator with an offensive minded head coach, you like to step out of that shadow, even if it's a big job. Being with Dan Lanning, who is a defensive coach, I think it's a pretty good situation for him. The recruiting is outstanding there. You look at what they put together on offense for this next season. Mekhi Hughes, DeCorian Moore, Evan Stewart coming back. So I would be surprised if that move were to happen, but Ohio State's not shy about going after big names. That's what happens in your Ohio State.
Next name here, Mike Shanahan, no relation to the Shanahan NFL family here, and he's the Indiana offensive coordinator, wide receiver coach, guy who played at Pitt, two-time captain at Pitt, and was at James Madison with Curt Cignetti, so came over with him, has been at Indiana, another guy who's thought of very, very highly in the coaching ranks here. And look, you and I were talking about this before the show. My thing with this one is, if you're going to go there, why not just hire Hartline on staff?
Yeah, and look, he had in 2023 for James Madison. You're talking about 16th in the nation of points per game. Then Indiana last year, second in the nation of points per game. Neither spot you had overwhelming talent. I mean, you had good talent, but not overwhelming talent relative to the competition. So the production is there. He's a young guy. He fits a lot of the profile of what you're looking for, but Pete, like we talked about, if you're Brian Hartline and a guy that's a wide receiver at Pitt, who's I think he might be younger than him, about the same, another young guy comes in and takes that job, I think that'd be a blow to Brian Hartline. But if you are lining them side by side, the advantage Shanahan has is the play calling experience and the success play calling.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think that goes to his favor. But I mean, that's the sort of move that if that was Hartline right there, who had gotten a year with that sort of play calling experience, I mean, he'd probably be a head coach somewhere after that. But that's why it's an interesting situation for me with that one if he doesn't end up getting the nod. Now, a couple interesting names here. Or three more names here. Kevin Wilson, who at these names that are here, this one to me makes a lot of sense. He has the experience there, was Ohio State's offensive coordinator from 2017 to 2022. And he was the head coach at Tulsa, didn't work out there, was the head coach at Indiana from 2011 to 2016. But the offense was top 7 in all 6 of his seasons there. So the guy can obviously coach an offense at Ohio State. It's the safe hire, if you ask me.
Yep. That one's, you know what you're going to get? Safe hire. Maybe there's a situation. I've heard this speculated. I think I heard on the Cover 3 podcast speculated that maybe you get Brian Hartline and Wilson to kind of one of those co-offensive deals where you ease in Hartline to the main role with Wilson being the old veteran. So you have options there. But yeah, you know what you're going to get with Wilson. You know the fit, pretty seamless. The consistency is outstanding when he was there. So that one's an easy one, and I think makes a lot of sense. You don't really need a swing for the fences if you're Ohio State. You could swing for a double as far as the coaching hire, and the talent that you have will take it over the fence. So to me, that one makes a lot of sense here, probably more so than some of these other names.
Toledo head coach Jason Candle has been there for 10 years. His name was talked about last year before they hired Chip Kelly. Miami, I remember there were some rumors about him with Miami a couple years ago before Shannon Dawson got hired that we had heard about. So obviously he's a head coach, but he's been there for a while, has had some good years there, but maybe needs a new twist of excitement in his life. And look, if he were to go to an Ohio State, show he can do it with that talent, maybe a bigger program says, man, we need to take a chance on this guy. He ran a solid program at Toledo for years. He showed now what he can do with big-time talent. So for him, I could see this potentially being an intriguing move.
Yeah. Toledo's kind of run his course there. 10 years. He's had tremendous success, but they were 8-5 last year. The offense was only 68th in scoring offense. So if you're an Ohio State fan, Candle's so respected, and he's proven to be a good head coach at the MAC level. It's not a sure thing that he's the best name on this list. I think it makes a lot of sense for Candle, right? Because if you want to be a head coach at a Power 4 school, a really high-level school, going to Ohio State, having a top 10, top 5 offense on top of everything he did at Toledo makes that transition to me a little easier. But I think it makes probably more sense for Candle than it does for Ohio State. But look, it would not be a bad move at all. This is a proven coach, a guy with tons of head coaching experience, very familiar with the state, and historically, even though they were down last year, has been known for having good offenses.
And then the last name we'll mention here, Neil Brown, former West Virginia head coach, has been thought of as one of the best, offensive minds in college football. That didn't really come to fruition this last year at West Virginia, and really as a whole when he was the head coach there. But a guy who was the head coach at Troy, offensive coordinator, quarterback coach at Kentucky, Texas Tech, Troy again before that. So really respected offensive mind. But coming off of what he's coming off of here, I don't know if this is the rebound job necessarily for him.
Yeah, I mean, it was a rebound job for Chip Kelly, but Chip Kelly he was in a category of his own, so much success to his name as a head coach and as an offensive mind. I don't know if Neil Brown's in that same category, but certainly someone who I think would be interested in this job and who brings some interesting ideas, particularly in the running game. But, I would put him lower on the list of some of the guys we mentioned.
Really interesting group of names here. You know how these coaching searches go. It could be someone who is completely off the board that we didn't even mention here, and that's sometimes how these things go. But there are a few options here that really seem to make a lot of sense. So we'll see what happens. I don't know if Ryan Day is going to want to get too crazy with it, because you get the right quarterback in place and you have a lot of talent already there. You just won the national championship. You have the best offensive player, best player in the country. So, like we've talked about, you don't need to reinvent the wheel there. But wrapping things up here.
Hold on, Pete, before that, let's get a question from New King God. He said, I know Mario wanted Candle in the past. If Dawson was to leave, you think Mario would go after Candle again? Yes. I think that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, without a doubt, for all the reasons we were just saying. Like, if you're Candle, he's done it for 10 years there, but obviously no one has come with an opportunity that's attractive enough for him to leave there, or it just hasn't presented itself for him. So if he were to come to another school like that and show it, he could do it with more talent, then they would be jumping for him, I'm sure. So last thing we wanted to get to today, and D, this is something that I know you have really wanted to talk about, is one of the, and we're going to be getting into a lot of these quarterback battles that are going to be brewing here over the spring and into the summer. But this one in particular is starting to look like one of the better battles coming up here. And especially when you kind of pair it with some of the coaching news that recently popped, which is that Ryan Grubb is headed back to, pair with Kalen DeBoer at Alabama. Of course, his longtime assistant was with him at Washington in previous stops. But this Alabama quarterback battle is going to be one where you have three guys who are really, really talented. Each of them have certain things working in their favor here. And we'll get into some of the high school tape for all three of them. But the room looks good. If you're a Bama fan, you've got to be excited about the talent level in there. I feel like years past at Bama, sometimes it's like, well, you have enough talent elsewhere. You just got to get a quarterback who can take care of the football, manage the game, all that. Obviously, it's been different in recent years. They've had some prolific guys, but you have a room here with some big-time talents and athletes at the position that I think have really high ceilings.
Yeah, we'll get into each of them individually, kind of skipping to the end. I do believe that the best choice might end up being, if things turn out the way I expect them to, and I'm just somebody with an opinion, but having watched this guy a ton, I got to think Keelan Russell ends up being the guy. He is so special. We'll get into all the different quarterbacks and some of the strengths and weaknesses and some of the fits. But man, can you imagine if Alabama has a true freshman starting at quarterback, and if he succeeds, how much hype he'll have going into those sophomore and junior years? It'd be a sensation. So before we get into that, starting at the top with the safe pick, the projected favorite to win that job, it is Ty Simpson, the redshirt junior, 6'2", 215. He's from Martin, Tennessee. His dad is the head coach at UT Martin, the college football team, small town Tennessee. This is a guy who was a 5-star out of high school, number 3 on the composite, 4 quarterbacks, but that was a long time ago. He is now 22 years old, having backed up Jalen Milroe for 2 years. And the betting, if you're betting, the favorite, at least for game 1, is going to be Ty Simpson. You watch him here, running around, scrambling. He's a guy who played basketball. He's got big hands. He is very athletic. I wouldn't call him a running quarterback, especially after seeing Jalen Milroe. He doesn't have that kind of power, doesn't have that kind of speed, but this is what he does. We saw him do it this year against Mercer before chucking the ball down the field. He is extremely elusive, slippery, likes to run around. He's got those big hands. He just kind of palms the ball and will make things happen. his production to this point, nothing outstanding. He hasn't had a ton of opportunities. 58% passer, 381 yards passing for his career at Alabama. 0 touchdowns, 0 INTs. 130 yards rushing, though, and 3 touchdowns there. With him, you could just see – it's funny he's a 5-star because it's not like his skill set just explodes on you like a DJ Lagway where you say, wow, this guy's got, incredible size, incredible arm, incredible speed. This guy's more of just a baller, right? As you could see there running the football. And I think there was some Matt Corral comps out of high school. I think this is probably a more consistent player mentally, to be kind, but I do see some of the physical traits being similar. But, with him, I think he could definitely be a productive SEC quarterback. He can definitely make plays for you. My concern is just true upside. And when I say upside, I'm talking about there's a program that had, Jalen Hurts about to start the Super Bowl as a backup. Mac Jones, who was a first-round pick, as a backup. Tua, top 5 pick, leading passer in the NFL 2 years ago. And then Bryce Young, number 1 overall pick. So the standards are pretty high at this particular school. And I think Ty Simpson can be a good winning quarterback at Alabama, but his upside, his standout tool might not be the same as some of those other guys. He's a good athlete, good playmaker, good arm, but I wouldn't say any area is particularly dominant.
So I mentioned the coaching implications, the recent move that was made for Coach Grubb to come back with Coach DeBoer. And Austin Mack is a guy who transferred over from Washington and seems to be a guy with his physical skill set that when the lights come on during spring here, if he takes care of business, could really be in position to win this job.
Yeah, and the Grubb factor is huge. When he went to Seattle, he said that the hardest part was telling the players he recruited that he was leaving. Talked about Austin Mack specifically, and this is, again, leaving Washington for Seattle. He said, Austin's unique in the sense that when I recruited Austin, talking to Brad and Lisa, his parents, he knew this was a possibility, meaning Grubb leaving Washington. Whether it was this year, next year, at some point, I told him there's a good chance that I wouldn't get to see the end of his career. So I think honest conversations like that when you recruit kids help when transitions like this happen. And who would have known that not only was he wrong about not seeing his career develop, it would happen at a different school, of course, Alabama. So very interesting, kind of the way college football works and the road all these guys take. And look, that's why you're honest with guys. Because if we would have lied to him and really left with a sour taste in his mouth, this could have been a bad reunion. But of course, it seems like it's going to be pretty seamless. Austin Mack follows Kalen DeBoer from Washington to Alabama, redshirt sophomore, number 16 quarterback in the country coming out of high school. So not as acclaimed as the 2 other 5-stars in this mix, but definitely a blue chip player. 6'6", 236, incredible size. He's going to be as big as any Alabama quarterback that we can remember. From Folsom, California in the Sacramento area. Same high school as current 5-star quarterback Ryder Lyons. He's someone who reclassified from the class of 24 to 23. So even though he hasn't played a ton, his development track, is normal, is right on track. Played a little bit this year, finished 2 of 3 passing against Mercer for 39 yards and a touchdown, had a nice 31-yard touchdown pass. And when you talk to Kalen DeBoer about Austin Mack's growth, he says he's one of the hardest workers on the team. There's a lot of guys that pour a lot into it. He's doing stuff on his own pretty much every day.
Yeah, you see how big he is, man. I mean, I don't know if we have measurements on it, but it looks like he has big hands, which I know, we always talk about for quarterbacks, how important that is. Good athlete, but not afraid to stand in the pocket in the face of pressure and make some tough throws. Yeah,
and you talk about a reclass kid with that kind of size. Big guys take a little longer to develop just because their bodies coordinate a little later. You see it. You can go to Little League Baseball. There's like a little tiny kid that's the best player the first year, and then the taller kids kind of catch up as their bodies catch up. Even at this age, it's similar. These tall guys that are 6'6", 6'5 plus take a little while to coordinate and get more athletic. And I think with Mack, the weight's coming on. 236. That's a big, heavy quarterback. He does have some athletic ability. You see him get outside the pocket and make some plays. But, with him, I think the key is the familiarity with the system, the belief that Grubb always had in him, because this was a player that he personally identified right along with DeBoer. So that's going to give him an edge in this competition. But I think there's a reason why it's unusual to see 6'6" quarterbacks in college football. The athletic challenges of dealing with SEC pass rush, big time pass rush, that's real. And he's going to have to show, it's hard to do in spring and fall with no contact jerseys, but he's going to need to show that on top of being able to stand above the line and deliver the ball, that he can get outside and create plays in a way that, look, doesn't have to be running like Jalen Milroe, but is he going to be able to make plays, which even a guy like Mac Jones, who's not known as a runner per se, was able to do when things got a little clouded.
So let's talk about what you said at the start is maybe your favorite to win the job. Not necessarily what the betting favorite would be, but in your opinion, the guy who will come out on top here.
Yeah, and here's what I would say. This is the transfer portal era. We're talking about Keelan Russell, the number 2 overall player in the composite, number 2 quarterback in the composite. Some people think he might be the best quarterback in the composite. I would not push back on that. So when you talk about how this all sets up, Ty Simpson's got 2 years. He's a redshirt junior. Austin Mack has 3 years. He's a redshirt sophomore. The portal era, guys are not sitting for more than 1 year. You could sit them for a year like Bryce Young, but to sit for multiple years when you're a 5-star type player is very, very difficult without letting that guy leave early for an immediate starting opportunity. It's just very hard to do. It's hard to budget for, and it's just hard to keep the kid happy. That's just the reality of this. So to me, because none of these other quarterbacks have a single year of eligibility, they're both going to be here most likely for 2 years. I'd be shocked if either was one and done to the pros. You're really picking the quarterback that you think is the best long-term fit. It's not just about this year. If it's close in terms of what you see in spring and in fall, to me, I think you have to pick the best quarterback so you don't lose the other guy. Doesn't mean, and the guy that starts game 1 doesn't necessarily have to start game 12, but there are advantages to when you have your guy, getting him on the field early and having him develop so he peaks in the playoffs, because this is Alabama. You're competing for national championships. So just some history on Keelan Russell. 6'3" quarterback out of Duncanville, one of the most productive high school players in the country, goes to the Elite 11, absolute star out there in that setting, goes to the Under Armour game, all-star setting where it's not that easy to shine as a quarterback. You got to throw to receivers you have no timing with, offensive line that's kind of thrown together. There's no chemistry. The pieces on offense aren't working together. And he was leading touchdown drive after touchdown drive in that setting. Jalen Daniels is the comparison you see at some of the recruiting services. He's got an incredible ability to make awkward throws. He's almost like a Gumby with his ability to just release the ball from all different kinds of angles. Just a really, really unique, talented player. Here are some other quarterbacks ranked in the top 5 in the composite going back to about 2017. These are the guys that 247 composite, top 5 overall players, and they played the position of quarterback going back to 2017. I'm not including guys like Arch Manning, who we haven't seen yet. Quinn Ewers, Bryce Young, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields. Number 1 overall pick, first round pick in Justin Fields. Quinn Ewers, maybe a 2nd or 3rd round pick who was a very productive college player. These guys usually don't bust when they're ranked that high in the modern era. There's a lot of quarterback bust in the top 10, but in that elite top 5 overall in the composite, it's a lot harder to bust. And from what I've seen from this player, mentally, physically, he does not seem like the type to fail. And you say, true freshman quarterback. Yeah, maybe we want to keep him long-term, but what about this season? Well, your left tackle's Caden Proctor. He's somebody with experience. He's someone with first-round NFL talent. You got Parker Brailsford at center, one of the best centers in the country, one of the most experienced centers in the country. Wide receiver, Ryan Williams, as elite as it gets. Jeremy Bernard, Isaiah Horton, very dependable veterans. And you're going to have a good running game. So you can bring him along slowly, but by year 3, even year 2, or maybe by the end of this year, in that Kalen DeBoer offense, I think this guy would be an absolute monster. And, he's going to maybe be protected early, handing the ball off, trying not to lose the game. But by the end of the year, he could develop into a playmaker, kind of how Trevor Lawrence did his first year by the end of the season. So to me, Keelan Russell is my pick to be Alabama's quarterback for the majority of this year. And I think it makes the most sense in the portal era.
February 4th, you've made your prediction here. So we'll see what happens. And I agree with you. Even if he's not the guy game 1, it could be a situation that as you get into the meat of your SEC schedule, you ease him into it and then he just takes control.
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, the nightmare scenario, you pick the wrong guy. Keelan Russell transfers to LSU or wherever and wins a Heisman, pulls the Jalen Daniels, pulls the Bo Nix, as far as being that special type of
I think
player.
you've called him Jaden. I think you've
Jaden. Sorry, there's too many.
You've said Jalen Daniels. Like I thought the first time I thought I misheard it, but now that you said it twice, it's Jaden.
What are the odds you got a Jaden and a Jalen Daniels playing quarterback at a high level of college football around the same time? Don't get mad at me. The parents need to have some more creativity in these names.
There you go.
But Jaden Daniels, you don't want a Jaden Daniels in LSU, which this kid could be. Let's say you go with Ty Simpson, 2-year starter. Russell says, I'm out of here. LSU needs a quarterback. I'll replace Nussmeier. I start next year. That's your worst nightmare if that guy becomes a Heisman type player. So these are the things you got to consider in the portal era.
Appreciate everyone who's been on with us live here, man. And we've had over 30 for most of the show. Great numbers. Remember to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss when we go live during the day here. I wish we could give you guys a daily time. It's just unrealistic for us two maniacs here who have no control of their schedules sometimes. But we appreciate you guys for hopping on with us today. We'll be back tomorrow. As always, Monday through Friday, we go live. Thank you all for joining us. See you tomorrow.